The worst match of each WWE year from 1985 to 2024. Firstly, the criteria. We'll be looking at matches from different eras and judging them by the standards for that era, or focus on high-profile matches, that is those that took place at major events and or involved top stars. Anyway, let's get into 1985. Classy Freddie Blassie vs Captain Lou Albano Steel Cage Match. In 1985, the WWF's Manager of the Year contest turned into everything wrestling fans expect from an award contest, a springboard for a beatdown and subsequent match. This was no different as heel manager Classy Freddie Blassie bludgeoned babyface manager Captain Lou Albano with his trademark cane after Lou won the trophy. This led to not one but two matches at the Nassau Coliseum. Billed as the Fossil Jostle, this less than epic series culminated in a steel cage match on 20th September 1985. Blassie was 67 while Lou was 52. The cage match was an embarrassing affair, and the WWE had no business subjecting the fans to this or asking either wrestler to compete. 1986, Uncle Elmer vs Adrian Adonis, WrestleMania 2. WrestleMania 2 was a disappointment for WWF fans. Although the boxing match between Mr. T and Rowdy Piper is a top candidate for 1986's worst match ever, it at least did what it was set out to do: portray the Rowdy Scott as a cowardly heel who took the easy way out, getting himself DQ'd when Mr. T's pugilistic skills got the better of him. On the other hand, Adrian Adonis and Uncle Elmer's match was a complete shit show. This was an example of two atrocious gimmicks of Adonis's adorable Adrian persona and Uncle Elmer, who was supposed to be a lovable hillbilly babyface but came off as a leftover from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. 1987, Lumberjack match of Randy Savage vs George Steele, Saturday night's main event. While Snarks can claim Andre the Giant vs Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3 was a bad match, the bout's place in history and the build to it are what drove the match, not a debilitated Andre the Giant working hard to help pass the torch. No, a much worse match was Randy Savage's Lumberjack match against George the Animal Steele during the second May edition of Saturday night's main event. Like many programs during the rock and wrestling era, Savage vs Steele was storyline driven, with the quality of the in-ring work coming in a distant second. Unfortunately, this program had dragged on too long, and this was a match that nobody wanted to see, even with the added stipulation of it being a lumberjack match. 1988, Ravishing Rick Rude vs the Junkyard Dog, SummerSlam. Ravishing Rick Rude is often considered an above-average worker, but his WWF career saw several times he was booked against opponents whose style clashed with his and/or opponents who were such bad workers that even he couldn't get a decent match out of them. One such match happened at SummerSlam when Rude squared off against the Junkyard Dog, a wrestler who had been phoning it in ever since he entered the WWF. Although, to be fair, even the best of workers dulled it down in the WWF, as Vince McMahon usually wanted short matches based off spectacle and strong storylines. The match ended when the Dog pulled down Rude's tights, revealing another set of tights, these with Jake Roberts' wife Cheryl's face painted on him. Naturally, Jake the Snake ran in and attacked Rude, leading to a DQ and sparing the fans the further agony of this match. 1989, Andre the Giant vs Jake Roberts, WrestleMania 5. In 1989, Andre the Giant was still considered the 8th wonder of the world, a wrestler whose size alone made him nearly unstoppable. However, the WWF seemed to devise a clear way to get around Andre's invincibility, revealing that the big man was deathly afraid of snakes. Enter Jake the Snake Roberts, who unleashed Damien on Andre, causing the big man to pass out. Would Roberts' not-so-secret weapon be enough to stop Andre? Well, fans found out at WrestleMania 5 when Jake battled Andre with Andre's longtime nemesis Big John Studd refereeing the bout. Regrettably, it was all too clear that Andre was in even worse condition than before, and the match was painful to watch. John Studd, whose presence was supposed to add another layer to the match, ended up being a non-factor, and fans were happy when this match ended after Andre attacked Studd. 1990, Roddy Piper vs Bad News Brown, WrestleMania 6. Is Roddy Piper painting himself half black reason enough to rate this match as the worst of 1990? Well, there's certainly a case for that, as even nearly 35 years ago, this was seen as tone-deaf at best and an incredible bad taste at worst. However, even if you discount Piper's theatrics, the match itself was a disappointment, as two of wrestling's greatest brawlers worked a match that made the Fossil Jostle look like UFC. 1991, Hulk Hogan vs Sergeant Slaughter, WrestleMania 7. Now, if you're looking for a bad match from 1991, look no further than anything involving Sergeant Slaughter, whose use of a modified atomic noogie as his finisher tells all you need to know about his lack of skills. Nothing is as agonizing as his 20-plus minute match against Hulk Hogan at Mania. 1992 Beverly Brothers vs the Bushwhackers Royal Rumble. While WrestleMania 8's Hulk Hogan vs Sid Justice match was a hot mess, including a bungled finish where Papa Shango missed his mark to run in and attack Hogan, nothing could match the sheer awfulness of the Beverly Brothers vs the Bushwhackers. Both teams were supposed to be comedy acts with less focus on wrestling. Where things failed was that there was little comedy here and even less wrestling. 1993 Bushwhackers and Men on a Mission vs Bam Bam Bigelow, Head Shrinkers, and Bastion Booger. The competition in 1993 was tight, especially if you remember this is the same year The Undertaker battled Giant Gonzalez at WrestleMania 9 and SummerSlam. However, even that exercise in futility can't hold a candle to the WWF asking Bam Bam Bigelow to get a good match out of the Bushwhackers and Men on a Mission, all made up to look like doink clowns, while stuck with anchors around his neck named Bastion Booger and the Head Shrinkers. 1994 Undertaker vs Underfaker, SummerSlam. Good Undertaker versus Bad Undertaker? Can you imagine Vince McMahon cackling up as he came up with this story of a heel manager Ted DiBiase introducing a villainous version of Taker after the good version apparently perished at the Rumble? Sadly, everything about this storyline grew progressively worse, culminating in a plotting match between the real Undertaker and the wrestler fans dubbed the Underfaker, aka Brian Lee. The only good thing about this match was that it marked the end of a terrible tale of two Takers. 1995 Mabel vs Yokozuna in Your House 4. If you're looking for a good year to enjoy pro wrestling, 1995 isn't it. Both WWF and WCW were dreadful, but no wrestler symbolized how desperate Vince McMahon was to jumpstart business than Mabel, a big man whose only asset was that he was 500 pounds. While Mabel vs Yoko seemed like an intriguing battle of the big boys, Yokozuna's weight problem sapped his wrestling ability, and Mabel had no wrestling ability to speak of. The results were predictably bad. 1996 Ultimate Warrior vs Goldust in Your House 7. What happens when a wrestler doesn't want to do anything other than collect a big payday? Vince McMahon found this out when he brought back Ultimate Warrior in an effort to combat WCW's growing popularity. The man who made Warrior University a laughingstock achieved similar results when he wrestled Goldust in Your House 7 for the Intercontinental Championship. In the Warrior's defense, Goldust's Larry Zbyszko-style stalling outside the ring didn't help the match, although it likely kept the Warrior from gassing up. 1997 Triple H vs Sergeant Slaughter, D-Generation X in Your House. While treating a top star like a piece of yesterday's garbage qualifies for Scumbag of the Year, we aren't considering Survivor Series' Shawn Michaels vs Bret Hart Montreal debacle. Instead, we're asking why the WWF chose to book Triple H versus Sergeant Slaughter, who was playing an authority figure in Your House, and more importantly, why Slaughter was booked strongly against Triple H in a boot camp match that went over 17 minutes. 1998 Tag Team Battle Royal, WrestleMania 14. WrestleMania 14's Tag Team Battle Royal featured many teams battling for a WWF Tag Team Championship match. The only problem was that the teams were either well past their prime or mid-card at best. Like many Tag Team Battle Royals, this was a dumpster fire that was a difficult show to follow, even if you were interested in seeing whether LOD 2000 could beat Bob Holly and Bart Gunn cosplaying the Midnight Express. Just to spare you the agony of watching this, LOD won. 1999 Kennel from Hell, Al Snow vs Big Boss Man, Unforgiven. If you think the Attitude Era was a golden age of one non-stop match after another, just tune into Unforgiven and watch the debacle known as the Kennel from Hell match between the Big Boss Man and Al Snow. Snow battled the Boss Man in a Hell in a Cell match, vowing vengeance for the Boss Man dog-napping Snow's pet pooch Pepper, then feeding it to Snow. As bad as that recipe was, it paled to the idea of throwing two wrestlers in the WWF's most brutal match at the time and surrounding the ring with another cage and dogs. The dogs using the ringside area for a public bathroom was a perfect analogy for this match. 2000 Pat Patterson vs Gerald Briscoe, Hardcore Evening Gown match, King of the Ring. And nothing comes close to Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe's Hardcore Evening Gown match, and this was the same year the Cat battled Terry Ronalds at WrestleMania. Both were horrendous, but come on, Pat Patterson vs Gerald Briscoe in an Evening Gown match? Come on. 2001 Brothers of Destruction vs Chronic, Unforgiven. What happens when a highly rated tag team enters the WWF and stumbles its way against Kane and The Undertaker in a high-profile match? If you're Brian Clark and Brian Adams of Chronic, you're told you have to go to the WWF's developmental territory, but Chronic refused, and that was the end of Chronic in the WWF. 2002 Bradshaw and Trish Stratus vs Christopher Nowinski and Jackie Gator on Raw. In 2002 was the beginning of a noticeable decline in the quality of female wrestlers competing in the WWE, as the company quickly rushed women into the ring who were improperly trained. While Jackie Gator's tag team match with Christopher Nowinski remains one of the worst bouts in company history, Gator deserves a little blame as she should have never been thrown into a match with her level of training. 2003, Undertaker vs Big Show and A-Train, WrestleMania 19. The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak has featured some epic bouts, but 2003's handicap match was one of the most randomly thrown together bouts ever. The novelty of Taker facing two wrestlers just didn't pay off, resulting in a boring and meaningless match. 2004, Undertaker vs Dudley's Concrete Crypt match, SummerSlam 2004. Speaking of handicap matches and the Dead Man, SummerSlam's match between The Undertaker vs the Dudleys revolved around a gimmick that seemed to ensure the Dudleys' victory. The Phenom's manager Paul Bearer was trapped in a chamber that slowly filled up with concrete, with the Dudley Boys manager Paul Heyman managing a control that poured more concrete in it. If Taker let Devon and Bubba Ray win, Paul Bearer would be spared. Incredibly, The Undertaker won and drove off Heyman. However, rather than saving Paul Bearer, he pulled a switch, apparently burying Bearer in concrete. Yep, a good WWE match always needs a quick death in them. 2005, Akibona vs Big Show, WrestleMania 21. A common theme in bad matches is ridiculous stipulations. A WrestleMania 21 sumo match between sumo star Akibona and the Big Show is just another example. Was the WWE hoping to draw sumo fans to the company by hosting this match? If so, it didn't pay off, and the work sumo match was a snooze fest that wasted everyone's time. 2006, The Undertaker vs Big Show, Punjabi Prison Match, Great American Bash. The WWE's decision to book The Great Khali vs The Undertaker in a Punjabi prison match offered hope that it could hide Khali's many faults in the ring. While no one was sure what the match was, it became irrelevant when the WWE had to replace Khali with the Big Show after Khali was not medically cleared. This was false hope though, as the match's rules proved confusing and it ended up in a cheap finish where the Big Show accidentally eliminated Taker from the cage. At 2007, The Great Khali vs Batista, SummerSlam. And just how bad a wrestler was The Great Khali? Not only did he stumble around the ring, Shawn Michaels once had to tell him which way to stand so he was facing the camera during a Royal Rumble match. Not surprisingly, Khali couldn't be counted on to stink up the joint whenever he wrestled, and SummerSlam was another example of Vince McMahon's obsession with pushing big men despite any big talent. 2008, Big Show vs Great Khali, Backlash. Are you sensing a pattern here? Well, despite his many shortcomings, the Great Khali was still in the WWE by 2008. His Backlash match against the Big Show might have been a classic hoss fight, but there was one problem: the Great Khali. 2009, Santino Marella vs Chavo and Vicky Guerrero, Extreme Rules. Just for the sake of not taking the easy way out, we're not going to pick the Great Khali vs Dolph Ziggler at 2009's worst match. On the other hand, the hog pen handicap match between Santino Marella and the tandem of Vicky and Chavo Guerrero had no business airing on regular TV, let alone a pay-per-view. 2010, Vince McMahon vs Bret Hart, WrestleMania 26. Now, in case you're wondering, the Great Khali vs Chris Jericho's match on Raw was a strong candidate, but nothing compared to the farce of Vince McMahon battling Bret Hart at WrestleMania 26. Even the smoke and mirrors protecting Bret couldn't hide how bad the match was or how plausible the idea of McMahon convincing Hart's family to betray him was. 2011, Kelly vs Brie Bella, Money in the Bank. The Divas era was in full effect in 2011, with the women's division largely revolving around eye candy. Such was the case with Kelly and Brie Bella, whose battle at Money in the Bank showed just how little Kelly had come since her in-ring debut and how far Brie had to go before she earned the fans' respect. 2012, John Cena vs Michael Cole, 4th June 2012 Raw. The idea of putting longtime announcer Michael Cole into matches was a horrendous idea when WWE pushed a Cole vs Jerry Lawler feud. Naturally, the WWE ignored fans' disgust and continued Cole's wrestling career, leading into facing John Cena on Raw and suffering another embarrassing loss. But not as embarrassing as fans had to explain to non-fans what they had just witnessed. 2013, Women's 7-on-7 Elimination Tag Team Match, Survivor Series. While the Divas era deserves much criticism for focus on looks rather than wrestling, fans know there were still some skilled workers and that several of the female superstars work hard to improve. Despite these efforts, the WWE often treated the division as an afterthought, such as 2013's match where 14 women wrestled for a scant 11 minutes, with little time for anyone to shine. 2014, Cameron vs AJ Lee Elimination Chamber. Following what was by far one of the most underrated matches on the card of the Wyatt family versus The Shield, we then got Cameron vs AJ Lee for the Divas Championship. As soon as the bell rang, it all went downhill from there. Sloppiness was on full display by Cameron, missing several spots, shenanigans by Tamina, the ref DQs in 3 minutes, utter shambles. 2015 Royal Rumble match, Royal Rumble. Hashtag cancel WWE Network trending on Twitter the day after the 2015 Rumble speaks volumes as to how the WWE Universe reacted to the match's finish, where The Rock returned to help Roman Reigns win against the Authorities' outside interference. While some fans were already tired of how strongly the WWE was pushing Reigns, more fans seemed angry at Daniel Bryan's elimination, and the match was seen as a reflection not only of average wrestling, but predictable and boring booking. 2016, Brock Lesnar vs Dean Ambrose, WrestleMania 32. Brock Lesnar was still the WWE's top dog in 2016 when Dean Ambrose decided to make a name for himself. As crazy as the idea of Ambrose having any chance against Lesnar seemed, booking Dean in a no-holds-barred street fight seemed to even the odds. However, the resulting match failed to entertain, as even the treasure trove of weapons failed to give them any edge. 2017, Randy Orton vs Bray Wyatt, WrestleMania 33. 2017 was another banner year for badness, including the kendo stick on a pole match between Alexa Bliss and Bayley that made the hugger look like a punk, or the WWE's odds to bring back the Punjabi prison match for Randy Orton vs Jinder Mahal. Despite these bad choices, they were eclipsed by WrestleMania 33's WWE title defense by Bray Wyatt against Randy Orton. Not only did Orton lose the belt right after winning it at Elimination Chamber, but the WWE decided to project various images of bugs and insects on the mat that had zero impact on the match. 2018, DX vs the Brothers of Destruction, Crown Jewel. While the WWE's partnership with Saudi Arabia to hold 2 wrestling spectaculars a year has proven financially profitable, the Saudis' government requests for marquee matches have led to some real duds, as wrestlers whose best years were in the rearview mirror have been brought back, often with horrible results. The dream match between Shawn Michaels and Triple H, aka DX, against Kane and The Undertaker, aka the Brothers of Destruction, turned into a complete nightmare, as it was clear all 4 men were out of step, and the ensuing blunders were many. 2019, Seth Rollins vs The Fiend, Hell in a Cell Extreme Rules. Now this was a hard one. Do we go with Goldberg dropping The Undertaker right on his head at Super Showdown 2019, or do we go with the horrendously booked Hell in a Cell Extreme Rules match between Seth Rollins and The Fiend? Well, The Fiend versus Seth Rollins won. Bray Wyatt's creative genius is undeniable, but as fans saw throughout his career, the WWE didn't always know how to take his ideas and use them effectively in 2019. 2019's Hell in a Cell match between Rollins and The Fiend, who was depicted as invulnerable to any harm, failed on multiple levels. First, the 2 superstars match was booked in a Hell in a Cell match, a match often reserved for the final match in a series. Second, the match ended in a referee stoppage, which violates the match's clear rule that there must be a winner by pinfall or submission. The WWE clearly didn't think this match through, as Rollins hit The Fiend with everything he could, only for The Fiend to keep getting up. This got tiresome after a while, and the finish of Rollins burying The Fiend under a pile of chairs and other weapons, leading to a ref stoppage, angered the fans, and worse, turned them against Rollins, who was even a babyface at the time. There were, count 'em, 11 curb stomps in this match. 11. And that still didn't put The Fiend down. 2020, Seth Rollins vs Rey Mysterio, eye for an eye match, Extreme Rules. If you can have an extreme match, why not make the stipulation that you can only win by taking out your opponent's eye? One problem is what you do when you've already taken out one of your opponent's eyes, and a victory means your opponent is now blind. Despite the obvious plot holes, the match turned out to be a dud, as both wrestlers plodded around in and out of the ring trying to weaken their opponent enough to take an eye out. Seth Rollins eventually won, with him throwing up on the outside of the ring, and as we know, Rey Mysterio's eye grew right back. 2021, Damian Priest vs The Miz Zombie Lumberjack match, Backlash. The WWE made some serious bank with product placement, and as fans saw in 2021's Backlash, it doesn't matter how ridiculous it is as long as the check clears. The Lumberjack match between Damian Priest and The Miz saw the return of a rarely used stipulation, but everything fell apart when the WWE announced that the Lumberjacks were actual zombies. This not-so-minor detail was used to promote the film Army of the Dead, but it turned what might have been an exciting match into a laughable dud. 2022, Men's Royal Rumble, Royal Rumble. How can you ruin one of the most anticipated matches of the year? While the exact details remain unknown, it appears that Shane McMahon made some poorly received changes to the match, including putting himself over strongly established WWE superstars. It got so bad that Vince actually even released Shane McMahon right after the pay-per-view. The finish of Brock Lesnar winning didn't help either, but the match was seen as a complete disappointment on many levels, including its overall lack of quality. 2023 Ronda Rousey vs Shayna Baszler, SummerSlam. Oh boy, 2023, there's so much to choose from. Gable Steveson vs Baron Corbin? What about Pat McAfee vs The Miz? Bray Wyatt vs LA Knight in that god-awful match at the Royal Rumble? Or how about Shane McMahon tearing his quads just seconds into a match? Well, none compared to Ronda Rousey's final match at SummerSlam. Rousey, who supposedly wanted to elevate Baszler by putting her over, worked another low-energy match that failed to entertain and gave fans no reason to think that Baszler was Rousey's successor. In 2024, Hayden Carter and Katana Chance vs Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell on Raw. As disappointing as Jey Uso vs Jimmy Uso's WrestleMania 40 bout was, it wasn't that bad. On the other hand, Maxine Dupree routinely works awful matches regardless of her opponents. However, you at least have to give her credit for trying to improve. On the other hand, we don't know what's going on with former WWE Women's Tag Team Champions Hayden Carter and Katana Chance, who went from heroes to zeros as soon as they won the titles. The less than dynamic duo's 18th March match against Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell on Raw is another example of a strong NXT team falling apart as soon as they're promoted. But there you have it, folks, our look at the worst WWE matches from 1985 until 2024. Do you guys agree? Let us know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.